What is up? Welcome back to another edition of the PFF podcast. I'm Mike Renner. Joining me, per usual, on the Early Week podcast is Sam Monson, and we're gonna dig into the draft a little bit. I know we've tried to skirt around that issue with the late week podcast, but it's become too pressing of an issue, to be honest. We're less than 2 weeks away. And really, there's nothing going on in the NFL world besides draft talk, besides posturing by these teams in the NFL, saying they're going to draft someone, saying they're going to trade for someone, smoke screens everywhere. We haven't talked much about Sam's draft board of yet. Sam's really been quiet on that front, but Sam's got takes nonetheless, like everyone else. So today, we're going to unveil Sam's guys in this draft, the guys that he's higher on than the general public. We touched on PFF's guys on last week's draft podcast if you want to go back and check that one out. But Sam, let's hear him.
Yeah, we're going to talk draft. I get to finally talk a bit of draft. It's weird. So I actually came with the draft later this year than normal with the way PFF's been set up this year. So a lot of the guys that I have that are my guys for the draft this year are just guys that I've liked for a couple of years now from doing college games, for doing the grading for PFF. The first of who I think is the biggest my guy I have in this draft, and it's a cornerback from University of Central Florida, Shaquille Griffin, who's actually started to generate a decent bit of buzz, had a really good combine workout, measurables were excellent, but he just jumped off the tape when I was doing some UCF games earlier this season. He's a ridiculously aggressive, feisty corner, has some really good coverage numbers this year, allowed only 38% of passes thrown his way to be caught, had 4 picks, 13 pass breakups. The downside is almost every time he allowed a catch, it seemed to go for a touchdown. He gave up 6 of them this year, though 3 of them came in one stinking game against Michigan, which was just a really bad day at the office for Griffin. But I think he's... Marshawn Lattimore is most people's number one corner in this draft. And I think Shaquille Griffin is a poor man's Lattimore, and not really, not that poor. I think the two of them they're not comparable. Obviously Lattimore is a top guy, one of the top 10 picks in this draft probably, and Griffin is not ever going to be in that bracket. But I think you could get a pretty good analog lower down in the draft with him.
I was going to say, athletically, there really isn't a difference at all. I mean, Griffin ran a 4.38. I think Lattimore was at 4.37. Griffin had 11-foot broad, 38.5-inch vertical, 17 reps on the bench, which is pretty ridiculous for a 194-pound man. That's about how much I weigh, and I'm not putting up close to 17 reps. So I've seen him a little bit. I haven't done much of the cornerbacks myself. I've been focusing more on the top guys in this class, but I'm a fan as well. The crazy thing is about this cornerback class, though, he's 18th now on our cornerback rankings, but that's only like 89th overall, which is there's 18 corners in the top 90 picks. There's just so many guys in the second and third rounds that could probably come in and start right away for teams.
Yeah, and I think we're a bit low on him at the moment. I know I'm higher on him than the overall rankings we have on him.
So where do you put it? Where would you draft him?
I haven't seen enough. I haven't seen enough of all the guys to know, but I think he's a second, third round guy. Like you say, he's athletically he's exactly the same as Lattimore, and they actually play the game similar as well. They're a similar style player. Obviously, Lattimore's got it done for Ohio State, whereas Griffin was playing for UCF. But interestingly, there's a story behind why he's there. He went to UCF because they were one of the teams that would take his brother as well as him, and he was only going to go somewhere where he could play with his brother, and his brother is a defensive end for UCF, and his deal is that he only has one hand. I can't remember if it was a birth defect or if he lost it due to some childhood illness or something, but he only has, I think he's without his left hand, so he's a one-handed defensive end who got 12 sacks I think last year and was legit. He was a legitimately well-graded pass rusher for us. So, but that's why Griffin is at UCF. I think he has much bigger potential than being a kind of low recruited guy and just being stuck there.
Yeah, that's a crazy, crazy story. If you haven't heard, Shaquille Griffin, only one-handed pass rusher. He's not in this draft class. He's in the next. He's going to graduate next year. Is that right?
Yeah, he's a redshirt senior, I think, going into this season.
Okay, that's just unbelievable story. So yeah, I think I'm high on him as well from what I've seen. Hopefully he turns it out because some of our cornerback, some of your guys in recent memory have struggled when they've come to the league in terms of injuries and that sort of thing. Haven't had much luck there.
Well, we found some. Guys like Devontae Harris, who was CBS's like 82nd ranked corner last year, undrafted guy, stuck on with the Saints immediately, got some playing time last year. We found some guys in the cornerback rankings or the cornerback draft stuff that we've been a lot higher on than other people who have done well. I think at the moment, cornerback it's kind of identifying exactly what it is we need to focus on and dial in on in terms of projecting these guys forward. But I think we've done well with some guys. Obviously, some guys we haven't.
I know. I was more mentioning that guys have gotten injured. I know Ja'Cory Shepherd, a few other guys got just ruined right out of the gate. That didn't help us out. But yeah.
I've tweeted a ton of Shaquille Griffin gifs on my Twitter. So if you search Sam Monson, Shaquille Griffin, you probably find a bunch of gifs on Twitter of him.
Who's your next guy, Sam? Shaquille Griffin, number one on your list.
So we've touched on him a little bit before, but I still love Cooper Kupp, wide receiver from Eastern Washington. Is that right?
Yes.
And I caught a couple of his
surprise
games.
Here, by the way.
Yeah, I caught a couple of his games doing grading for Oregon and somebody else we played, and he just, I don't care what he measures. I really don't. I think he ran a 4.6, was it? And, everyone that liked him was hoping he'd be in the 4.5s, at least make it sort of, so you don't have to worry about the athleticism and you can just project forward. I really don't care that he runs a 4.6 because I think he plays faster than that. The way he runs routes, he's going to make up that 10th of a second somewhere in the route, somewhere in the break that other guys aren't doing, straight line speed guys. So, and when you watched him, even just run the drills at the combine, he ran routes and he's just so smooth, makes everything look way easier than any other receiver. It's just all natural to him. Now maybe he is limited to a slot role at the next level and that's where he's going to have to ply his trade, but I think this guy is guaranteed to be a productive player. He's just too natural playing receiver. The only thing I will say that terrifies the crap out of me is that his mock draftable spider graph thing, it's like a 92% match from Mike Haas from Oregon State. And the reason that terrifies me is not because Mike Haas crapped out of the league pretty quickly. It's because I kind of liked Mike Haas as well. So that's a little bit worrying.
I was going to say, you haven't seen a 6-foot white slot receiver that you didn't absolutely love who was productive in college. I'll just say that. I think that's you have a type, Sam, and that's your type.
I don't think there's too many of those guys out there, but yeah, Mike Haas was definitely one that I thought had a role at the next level, and apparently he really didn't.
Here's why I'm not too worried about Kupp, and I think, like you said, I'm on board with him as well, and why I think even the athleticism concerns are overblown. I get that he's not straight line fast, but he had a 6.53 second 3-cone at his pro day. At 6'2", 204 pounds, which is that's unbelievably fast. That's a ridiculous time, and that's what shows up on tape. This ability to stop on dimes, to cut routes off at the break with ridiculous precision. So I'm on board. I think he does so many things well as a wide receiver. And I don't even think, like you said, I don't think he's limited to a slot role. I think he can play an X. I think he can play on the outside just fine. So yeah, I'm on board with Cooper Kupp as maybe not a first rounder, but if you can get him at the top of the second round, one of those teams there that's needy of a wide receiver, I'd be happy as well. So I can get on board with that being one of the guys in this class. Who else you got?
So this one isn't under the radar at all, but I'm going to make up for that with the next one being way under the radar. But I've done almost all of Stanford's games of the last 3 seasons. So I am all aboard the Christian McCaffrey hype train. This guy, there's a lot of talk about him being, you need to put him on a pitch count. This is a small guy. You're going to have to use him like Reggie Bush. No, crap. The guy's had 820 touches or something over the last 3 seasons, which is more than Derrick Henry, and Derrick Henry had 395 in one season. He has been a workhorse. In fact, that's the thing that concerns me more than his ability to be a workhorse, is the fact that he already has been for 2 straight seasons for Stanford. But this is the perfect back for the 2017 NFL. This is a guy that I think could play both running back and wide receiver almost to an equal level of proficiency, which gives you the ultimate matchup weapon as an offense. You can deploy this guy anywhere, and you can't know how to defend him from a personnel standpoint before the ball is snapped or before the offense actually lines up. You don't know what to do with him, and that could make him absolutely devastating in an offense that's prepared to do that.
Yeah, I think I can get on board with the fact that a guy doesn't have to be underrated for him to be your guy. I think that's completely valid to call Christian McCaffrey your guy, even if everyone's high on him. And if you think the guy is a lock to be what he's projected as, if you think he's going to be a ridiculous, or if he's going to be this, weapon in the NFL that is dual threat, backfield, slot, and doing both well, I think that's completely fair. And another one I can get on board with. I'm a fan of Christian McCaffrey, what he brings to the table. I do have concerns about him getting a ton of carries at the running back position at his size. I know you don't because of what he did at Stanford, but I just think history has shown you just, as a smaller back, you just take hits harder when it gets to the NFL. So that to me is the only concern, but I think you kind of manipulate his touches by not giving him 20 carries out of, the dot, out of the I formation, and lead him right into the line of scrimmage. You get him out in space more. You get him 20 touches by getting him 8 catches a game and 12 handoffs, something like that. So I think what he brings to the table, though, no real other back in this class can match.
And the thing is, most teams aren't doing that anyway. Most teams aren't just pounding their running back into the line from the I formation anymore. You can line him up, single back, running inside zone, running outside zone. It's not just, walking him straight into a brick wall where he's going to get pounded. This is a guy that knows how to avoid contact, has done it well throughout his college career at Stanford. And then you have all that extra value with the receiving stuff, with the returns. He was a kick returner and a punt returner at Stanford, which is big value as well if you're prepared to use him that way.
I think a lot of times also when guys are positionally smaller. So like a small running back is sort of confirmation bias when he gets hurt.
Yeah.
When people say, oh yeah, he was a small running back, he was bound to get hurt. But then when someone like DeMarco Murray is injured every season and he's, 225 pounds, ideal size for running back, all of a sudden there's, he's injury prone, that you get a different label when sometimes injuries are luck. Sometimes they're flukes.
Yeah.
Sometimes guys just are tightly strung and are bound to get injured. And obviously McCaffrey's doesn't seem like a guy who's,
just in this draft,
habitually injured. So yeah.
Just in this draft, compare him to Leonard Fournette. Leonard Fournette missed most of last year.
Exactly.
Banged up with an ankle injury, but because he weighed in at the combine at like 245, nobody's saying, well, this guy's an injury risk at the next level. And he's had fewer carries or fewer touches than McCaffrey. So, like I say, I'm not big on the he's an injury waiting to happen deal. I think that he's shown to be as durable as any other back in this class, and he brings so much more potential.
I'm going to go give kind of a hot take. This one's just off the top of my head. I would guess that taller running backs are more likely to be injury prone than
I can see that.
Even slighter running backs, because you just have a higher strike zone on your legs. You just have more, guys are going to hit you more in the knees and ankles when you just don't have as big of a strike zone if you're a 5'9" type of guy carrying the rock every down. I'm just going out on a limb and saying I have nothing to back that up. I'm going to say that's the case.
Well, that was one of the things that made Barry Sanders so ridiculous, is that he was so small, you just couldn't ever get a good shot on him. Like, obviously, the way he ran helped that, but you never, ever got a clean 100%, he's there, you get to tee him up and just drill the guy. It never happened. So it didn't matter that he was only 205 pounds, because you never got the shot. You never got the opportunity to break the guy in half.
Yep, I'm on board with it. That's 100% the fact now. We're gonna accept that in the draft community.
Yep.
Tall running backs equals injury prone. All right. You got how many more you got?
Two more.
All right.
So this is my way under the radar guy. I have not seen anybody else mention this guy's name, including us. But this guy is graded really well in limited snaps every single year. He's a defensive lineman for USF, University of South Florida, the Bulls. Daniel and I'm going to struggle with this second name, but I even looked up the pronunciation guide, so I'm going to go with it. Daniel Awolake. And he has been really solid in limited snaps for us. Guy has gotten consistently good penetration against the run in particular. He's able to knife through and stuff these guys in the backfield. I think he had 24 defensive stops this year, which is when he was only playing, I think, 400 and something snaps this season. So he's getting production that a lot of these bigger guys are getting on significantly more snaps. I think this, and he's 273 pounds, I think, 6'3". This is a guy with the ability to play at the next level and one of those kind of late round undrafted type gems I think that someone might be able to uncover.
Interesting. He weighed in at 6'3", 264
Ooh.
At his pro day, though. Is that changing your mind at all?
No, it just, I think he's a defensive end anyway going forward. He's kind of in the Solomon Thomas,
base end.
Yeah, the sort of base end who can potentially kick inside and work with that penetration, that quickness inside. That's the mold I have him in, so that doesn't really change things, I think.
He did do 32 reps at his pro day.
There you go.
But he also had a 4.97 40.
Not
and
ideal.
A 7.56 3 cone with a 4.78 shuttle, which are not good numbers, I'll just say.
Look, I'm not saying this is a stud prospect or anything, but this is a potential steal late on.
He can make the roster of. Okay. All right. I'm going to guess, go on a limb, that he's not going to get drafted. But it might if he makes a roster, I think that's a win for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll take that.
All right. Oh, well, okay. Keep an eye on him.
There you go.
Who else? Last one.
So this is interesting because we've now this is our third year doing college grading, our third year doing this whole draft process. And the very first season, we were going through and we were watching tape of all these guys to try and figure out, what matched up with the grading, what didn't, where were we right, where were we off, what do we need to tinker. And Justin Hardy was a wide receiver out of ECU who a lot of people really liked, had ridiculous numbers because of that offense there, caught, 1 million passes for 1 billion yards and all that kind of stuff. And we were going through Justin Hardy tape, and I really didn't like what I saw that much. I wasn't that impressed. And the thing that I kept saying all the way through this tape is, I don't really like Justin Hardy, but whoever this other receiver at ECU is, looks kind of handy. And it turns out that other receiver was Zay Jones, who now, a couple of years later, fast forwarded again because of that ECU offense, had ridiculous numbers this year. I think he had, 218 targets, I think. No, 224, including...
They just bubble screen.
Yeah.
They just bubble screen him to death. It's just ridiculous.
So it's just, ludicrous number of catches, 1,800 yards, just obscene. And then we get the Senior Bowl and we start seeing some of this hype match up even at a higher level, if you like, an all-star game. And he's making plays and plays look fantastic. So a couple of years ago, I thought that guy was significantly better than Justin Hardy. I think the way their standings are in the draft community at the moment, projecting forward, that looks to have been right on the money. But just in terms of being first aboard the Zay Jones train, he's one of my guys still.
Oh, you're a big first guy.
Absolutely.
Damn. I want to be correct at the end. I'd rather not. Getting into it first is fine, but being right at the end, infinitely more important in my book. But I can get on board with Zay Jones being a talented receiver. I think he does more things, like you said, more things well than Justin Hardy did coming out. Definitely more polished receiver, despite the fact that he's playing an offense that's super gimmicky compared to what he's going to see in the NFL. But I think he can actually separate down the field and actually can run more of a full route tree already. So I think he's in the Cooper Kupp range in terms of where you can get value out of him in this draft.
Yeah.
There you have it. So go over him again. You had Zay Jones, some guy from USF, that Daniel Awolake.
Yeah, Shaquille Griffin, Cooper Kupp, Christian McCaffrey, Zay Jones, and Daniel Awolake.
Good list. All right, those are Sam's guys. Make sure to look out for them next week come draft time, and for Awolake in days after the draft, most likely. But we'll move on from Sam's guys to the draft's most overrated players. We haven't touched on this really. The guys that I think me and Steve have touched on a little bit in our risers and fallers segments on the draft podcast, but we haven't really hit the most overrated guys that we really just don't like. But Sam and I are known haters. We relish the fact to take guys down, especially young college kids who didn't ask for this at all. So we're gonna hate on some guys here, and I want to hear your single most overrated player in this draft, Sam.
So here's the thing. When you say that, the young college kids who didn't ask for it, they're just there trying to get a gig. I agree with that. And when I do overrated and when I lay hate on prospects, I try and keep it as high up the draft board as possible. So I was all over hammering Christian Hackenberg rather, because there was no way he wasn't going to go in the first couple of rounds of the draft. So I have no problem with that. He's going to make millions of dollars out of the NFL. Somebody's going to make that move. I have absolutely no issue saying that this guy was terrible and shouldn't have been drafted, because it didn't matter. He was going to go high anyway. I don't really want to do it to a guy who, is relatively low round or mid round guy anyway, because, he may end up not getting drafted, and that would kind of suck.
Yeah.
So I'm going to keep it to the top guys, and I actually don't hate most of these guys. I just think they're overrated. The one guy that I really don't like in this list is the one I'm going to start with, and it's the quarterback out of Notre Dame, Deshaun Kaiser, who and I know you being your Notre Dame man, I've done some Notre Dame games, and I just never saw it with Kaiser. You look at this guy and you think, okay, the traits are there. There's a big arm. He kind of looks at times like he could be this prototypical NFL pocket passer, but you just never see it particularly consistently, and there's a lot of bad that comes along with it. I just don't see Deshaun Kaiser becoming a legitimate NFL starter down the line. Plus, you then have stuff coming out about, maturity and Brian Kelly throwing him under the bus and all that kind of stuff. It just doesn't look like this is a guy that should be getting first round hype.
No, I've said that I'm not super high on him either. I can see what you can fall in love with. I can see the traits and whatnot that you would like projecting the next level, and I can see how he could eventually be successful in the NFL. I don't think right away he's going to be anything special. But even just talking to, my friends who went to Notre Dame and people, this past season, no one was ever really like huge fans of him as the quarterback. Everyone was kind of always just, he never seemed to put together full games where it was just lights out type performances that, you thought you'd see moving from a pretty solid sophomore year. He just didn't really build on that at all. So I'm not terribly sad that he declared early is all I'll say. So,
and he's he's the poster boy for this traits drafting stuff. Because everyone's looking at quarterbacks.
Well, that's Christian Hackenberg.
Yeah, well, except Christian Hackenberg didn't have most of the traits. That was the weird thing about him. Kaiser at least has the arm and has the stature and looks every bit the NFL starting quarterback. Hackenberg didn't even have that. His arm was not particularly impressive, despite, for some reason, people claiming it was. Turned out he was way smaller than everybody expected him to be. He wasn't. It's not like this is a giant, Big Ben level stature of quarterback. Hackenberg, for whatever reason, just had the thing where everybody was like, quarterback. But, so I tweeted that I'm more intrigued by Nathan Peterman out of Pittsburgh than I am by Deshaun Kaiser. And it's not because I think Peterman is particularly impressive, and I think he's very physically limited, but I think there's a chance, like with Cody Kessler, there was a shot that he could develop into a guy that can start in a pinch and potentially be a very good backup down the line, which ultimately beats a guy that flames out and never becomes anything.
Yeah. Yeah, I could definitely see him just never even seeing a field if he goes into something like the second round, something similar to what Hackenberg's going to do. So, all right, who else you got overrated?
Overrated. Leonard Fournette.
Oh, that's one on my list too. We're kindred spirits in the Fournette hate.
And look, Fournette was supposed to be this amazing, untouchable, unstoppable running back prospect. He's the next Adrian Peterson. He should sit out this year in case he gets hurt and just declare for the NFL draft. And he is. I actually really like the Adrian Peterson comparison for him because I think he is exactly like Adrian Peterson in terms of he is a 1.5 down back in a 3 down league, which is, It's
You're really trying
useful.
to coin that term here.
I am. I'm making it. And people are just going to pick it up. It's going to happen because I'm not
Buy
stopping.
your 1.5 down backs on the PFF store here.
I'm going to get me a T-shirt. That's the way to start that.
Yeah.
But I think it's exactly right. There's just only so much value in that. Those guys can have an impact, but you can't have them on the field in passing downs. And I swear to God, there are people out there that think that his hands are fine. He has hands made of feet. He cannot catch. Like, there are passes where he was given a quick little shovel pass and had to, like, triple catch the thing before finally bringing it in and making something. Even in the combine, he was running the drills. There was a couple of double catches in there. Then he cleaned it up.
Yeah, I was going to say, he almost, like, threw a ball straight up in the air, and then he still caught it. But it's like...
Now, okay, he caught
and also,
that.
catching a ball without pads on is infinitely easier than catching it with pads on. If you have any sort of, hesitation, like in the way you attack a ball, it just gets amplified when you have pads on.
At the very minimum, I think you're saying that this guy can only be on the field in third downs in terms of an outlet. You can dump him the ball off, and that's all you're going to get out of him. You can't do anything creative with him in terms of routes. Who knows if he can pass protect particularly well? That was another one of Adrian Peterson's flaws. So you're literally just putting him out there for the obvious running situations and saying that is worth a top 10 pick, and it just isn't.
So this is kind of getting off topic, but how was Adrian Peterson such a bad pass protector? Like, that didn't even make sense.
I have no idea. That's the one thing.
It has to just be an effort thing. It seems like playing defense in basketball. There's no real reason you shouldn't be good at it besides you don't want to be good at it when you're that size.
There's definitely technique involved in it, but if you're a 220-pound running back who just destroys people physically, there's no reason you should not be at least capable as a pass-protecting running back.
Let's say a technique at the running back is basically just throw a shoulder into a guy.
Sometimes, sometimes the case of how quickly you get shed, you can throw the shot on somebody and they can just immediately toss you to the side. That, I think, was always his problem. He would stick his face in there. It just wouldn't last more than the instant of contact.
Yeah. All right. Let's get back on topic.
Yeah.
Leonard Fournette, though, I'm on board. I even don't think he's... and my biggest thing is with him, you can't run him out of the shotgun. If you put him in a shotgun heavy,
again,
he's
Adrian
just
Peterson
not going to. Yeah, exactly. So you're not, and that's. I'm not gonna say that doesn't have value running from the dot, running from under quarterback under center. Some teams are doing that heavily. That's why the Titans valued someone like Derrick Henry a season ago. But there's just not a lot of teams that fits with. And if you want to go to that, you better have a good offensive line to run that heavily in offense. So,
and the Derrick Henry thing isn't a bad comparison either, because that's the offense where he is most valuable, and Derrick Henry is a second round pick.
Yes. So, and they barely use him. So I don't endorse Fournette top 5. I don't endorse Fournette in the first round. So
that's preach.
That's me. All right, go. Who's your next?
All right, my next one, I've got into trouble on Twitter with this one as well. Cam Robinson, tackle from Alabama. Look, you put on Cam Robinson tape and you can see immediately why people like him, right? He's another guy, a bit like Kaiser, where he has all the traits. He looks like a top-level left tackle. He's athletic, he can get on the run, he can crush people when he gets hold of them, and he's just never done it consistently. And there are so many blown communication issues that he is at the heart of. Now, maybe they're all not his fault, but the more of them you find, the more that becomes unlikely, and the chances that he is somewhere at fault of all these blown miscommunications between the left guard and the left tackle, it just becomes likelier and likelier that it's him at the root of it all. And even if it wasn't, he just hasn't consistently dominated the way you're supposed to. And at Alabama, it's not like he hasn't had good coaching. It's not like you're getting a guy that's come out of a college where you don't trust the level of coaching he's got. You think, I can fix all of that in 2 weeks of solid coaching. He's going to have had quality coaching and has never gotten any better.
No, I think you really hit the nail on my biggest issue with him and why I would just be terrified of drafting him in the first round. I see the traits. Yes, I can see how this could be a quality starting left tackle in the NFL for the next 10 years, one of those type of guys. He has that sort of physical ability, but you hit it right on the head when you said the amount of blown assignments that he was either a part of or, the left side of the line had, and the amount of false starts he had just speaks to a lack of concentration when on the offensive line, concentration and, consistency is so paramount. You just can't, when it's only you're giving up four pressures in one game is bad, one pressure in a game is good. When it's that fine of a line that you're towing as an offensive lineman, to be that inconsistent in your assignments and that sort of thing, when you have, like you said, the coaching at Alabama, when there's no real excuse for you to be that inconsistent, that just worries me projecting the next level. It's only gonna get worse, I feel like, in the next level. You don't all of a sudden just clean that. He's gonna have to do a complete 180 to clean that up in the NFL, and that just worries me if he ever will.
Yeah, I agree completely. So that's me done with like the ones that I really think are heavily overrated. The next two, I don't even dislike. In fact, I like both these guys as players, but I think that they're a little bit overrated. This one is going to piss a lot of people off. Jamal Adams, right? My issue with Jamal Adams is that...
You're going to piss me off.
Well, I can live with that.
Well, you're just wrong.
My issue with Jamal Adams is that he has proven to be really, really good in the box. And that's fine, but the NFL is swimming with those guys because everybody that comes out of college is struggling to play the deep middle, the Earl Thomas role that everybody is looking for. So you get tried there, and then you get moved into the box, and that's where you get back to being where you were good at, because that's what you did in college. And the problem is, that just isn't that valuable. That was Eric Berry's problem. Though actually, to be fair to Eric Berry, he proved this season that he can actually play deep again, weirdly. He'd failed at that earlier in his Chiefs career, been moved in the box, which is where he became productive again. And then this past season, he got moved deeper off the line, and suddenly he actually proved he could do that. But look at Landon Collins. Landon Collins just couldn't play that deep role, got moved into the box, and suddenly you get this dominant player. Same things happened with Jonathan Cyprien, with Tony Jefferson last year proved that in the box he's a really good player. And those guys, if you get Eric Berry, and that's what Jamal Adams is to me, if you get Eric Berry, is he worth the number 3 overall pick, the number 2 overall pick, which is where people are starting to put him? I don't think so.
So I think you're very much underselling Jamal Adams' skill set. I don't think he's limited to a box safety. I think his biggest asset, and what I saw on tape, was his ability to cover the slot.
Yeah,
and drop down and do that. And I think he does that as well as not just any safety in this class, as well as any cornerback in this class. I think playing him as a quarter safety, he could be a game changer, someone like an Eric Weddle does for Baltimore. So I think you're limiting he actually does by calling him a box safety.
I don't know if he's limited to that. My problem is I haven't seen him do the deep stuff enough.
No, I'm fine saying that. I'm fine saying that he won't be an impact single high type of safety. I can live with that sort of characterization of him. But I think just calling him a box safety is doing him a disservice. He can do a lot more. He can be sort of a Swiss Army knife where you put him in any sort of role you need for the call defense, and he can execute, what's asked of him.
Put it this way, just in terms of the safety class this year, right? It's Jamal Adams against Hooker from Ohio State. And Hooker, I think, has a rare skill set of being able to play that Earl Thomas role, be able to be your Ed Reed as your deep free safety, the single high guy, and impact plays all over the field and create turnovers doing it as well. I mean, he actually does that better than Earl Thomas, I think, in terms of actually identifying where the ball is and making a play on it, not just getting there and involving yourself. The value of that compared with the value of what Adams does, I think, is night and day. That can be the linchpin of half the secondaries in the NFL. Adams, I don't think, is.
No, I definitely agree. If you're any sort of team that plays a good deal of man
or cover three,
excuse me, sorry.
Anything with a single high safety.
Anything with single high safety, you're going to have Hooker higher on your board. But if you're Carolina, if you're Pittsburgh, if you're any team that does split safeties, Green Bay, that sort of thing, where you're using two safeties in a very varied role where they're a featured part of your defense, I think you have to value Adams' skill set higher.
I haven't actually looked up the splits, but I would guess that it's about 50-50 in the league at the moment between those two.
Single and I think single high is far more prevalent, actually.
Okay,
I think
that works even better.
60. I think it's more like 65.
That helps me out even more. My point is, I don't see any justification for why anybody would have Jamal Adams above. Not anybody. Why anybody running a single high safety scheme would have Jamal Adams above Hooker, and yet in almost every mock draft you see, it's that order. It's Jamal Adams above Hooker.
Well, Jamal, I think it's because Chicago's also a split safety team, is why you see him going projected there a lot.
Sure, but I think even in terms of rankings, most people
Yeah,
have
yeah.
Adams, not just mock drafts.
Fair enough. I think he's more of I don't want to say a sure thing in terms of what he can bring to the table. Whereas Hooker made some ridiculous plays at
that's
Ohio
fair.
State, covering ground. Is he going to be consistent enough though in that to not get burnt badly? Because he got torched a few times at Ohio State as well. So that kind of gets swept under the radar with his skill set.
Yeah.
But
And I do want to make the point again that I like Adams. I just don't think that he should be getting top 5 love, given what I think he is.
fair enough. I'm fine with that.
And the next one is going to be even more, controversial, because I think Myles Garrett is overrated.
Oh, Sam. Now you're getting.
Stay with me here.
Jump the shark. Okay.
No. Look, Myles Garrett is the consensus #1 player in this entire draft. Everybody says Myles Garrett, phenom, monster, dominant, crushing. Look at this athleticism. Blew away the combine, blew away the pro day, all this kind of stuff. Okay, fine. And he is really good. But he hasn't dominated the way you expect a consensus #1 complete crushing player to do. He has not graded in the Joey Bosa range for us, which was what that, crushing consensus dominant player is expected to do. He's graded well, but there are guys up with him. There are guys in his era, and all of those are below that Joey Bosa level of complete, utter dominance. I do not think that he is the consensus #1 best player in this draft. In fact, I'm not even sure he is the best edge rusher in this draft. He's definitely the most athletic or the best athlete amongst the group, which potentially gives him the best upside. But in terms of what he has done and what kind of player they are right now, I don't know that he is the best guy in this draft.
So I will say this, just from a grading perspective. Myles Garrett, from where he lined up, which was outside the left tackle, snap after snap, for the most part, he was much easier to account for opposing offenses than Joey Bosa was. Because Joey Bosa would kick inside the tackles, do that. So, like you can't chip a guy lined up, head up on a tackle. Doesn't really work like that. And he would line up all across the formation. But Myles Garrett would stay on the right side, stay outside. Left tackle, you knew where he was. You could bring a chip there. In the run game, they would leave him unblocked on the option all the time just to sort of, nullify his best attribute, which is beating blocks. So a lot of reps in our grading would just be sort of wasted because teams were accounting for him full bore. So I think that plays a part in it. And I also think there is you're right, he's not nearly as developed at this point in terms of skill set as Joey Bosa is. But the thing is, he could get by on pure physical dominance of the guy in front of him because he was that freaky of an athlete. He really didn't have to refine his skill set. But you also see the coordination from him to where I think he could learn that sort of skill set very easily. Not very easily, but it's going to come with time at the next level. So I really don't have many question marks. I'm not nearly as low on him as you are. I think he's a lock #1. I wouldn't even consider anyone else.
I think he will go #1, absolutely. And
yeah, but I'm saying he'd be a lock
#1. And again, I'm not saying he's a bad player, but
would you not take him #1 overall? Is that what you're saying?
If I'm the Browns, and I don't know. I think I'm not sure there is a consensus #1 player for this. I'm flustered. I'm struggling here. Honestly, if I'm the Browns, I might take Hooker #1 overall.
Oh, God.
Because he is this guy. Look, I'm saying Hooker can be a game changer in terms of scheme. He is one of those guys that can play that Earl Thomas role, which makes everything else in a defense better. I don't know that Myles Garrett does that. Maybe he can become a top 5 edge rusher in the NFL, which helps, but it's not a complete universal transformation of a defense the way having an Earl Thomas is. You only have to look at what happened with the Seahawks when he disappeared. Stephen Terrell, I don't think is a bad player, playing that single high role, but he just couldn't do what Earl Thomas did, and the whole defense looked completely different. So, yeah, that would be my hot take is if I'm the Browns, I might look to take Hooker #1.
Ooh, that's too hot for me. I can't even come close to getting on board with that. Oh my lord!
This is the level you need to aspire to, Mike. Look, I'm just rocking and rolling with this stuff, and I'm coming out with hotter takes than you've had.
That was special. That was, yeah. All right. I'll quickly roll through my overrated players here. Because I've touched on most of these guys already. I hit Fournette already. This next guy I've talked about ad nauseum, Tyus Bowser. Basically, he was not a pass rusher at Houston. If you're going to draft him to be a pass rusher, he didn't do that at Houston. He dropped into coverage more than he was a pass rusher. I think over the last 3 seasons, only rushed the passer 523 times. Jordan Willis did that this season alone. So you just have such a limited sample size on him. You would have to teach him how to be a pass rusher, and I can't get on board with that in the first round, which is he's getting some first round hype at this point. Crazy to me. Another running back I'll say is Samaje Perine. Basically, he just can't cut I don't love his vision, and his cutting ability is so slow in his cuts even for a bigger back. I don't think he has anything special in terms of cutting ability, and he's not going to break tackles. He has no shake in the hole. He ran over guys in college, but he's not so overly powerful that he's going to do that in the NFL level. That I don't know if you've seen any of P. Ryan, but I'm not a fan of him. And there's a reason why Joe Mixon replaced him this year.
Yeah,
also.
A little bit. I could buy those.
Next one, Jabril Peppers, talked about as well. At the end of the day, he's a safety who hasn't played safety.
He's a running back.
And also, and I can't even get on board with him as a first-round running back.
So, no, not a first-round one.
But, yeah, he's a safety who never really played safety at Michigan. He played the overhang sort of slot corner outside linebacker role that doesn't really exist in the NFL.
The Jeremy Cash role.
Yeah, there's not huge spread offenses. So he wasn't terribly impactful in that role. I think there's so much projection to him that I'm not taking a project at safety in the first round in this draft. And I think someone will end up taking him there. So overrated to me. And then my last one, gonna be a little hot guy that is pretty much a consensus top 15 pick at this point, and it's O.J. Howard, the tight end from Alabama. The thing is, I love that he's a very competent inline blocker and that you can use him in that role immediately and that you have no real issues with him there. I just think that for a tight end to be worthy of how high he's going to get drafted, he better be a ridiculous red zone threat. He better be a great contested catch guy. And I don't see that at all. He's a body catcher. I don't see him attack balls in the air with any sort of, special ability. I think to me, he's Jared Cook with a little more consistent hands, but that's not been proven to be a great, receiving threat in the NFL. I just don't see much after the catch ability either, even though he's fast. He has straight line ability, but he only broke a handful of tackles in his career at Alabama. So a lot of sort of red flags there for me to get on board with a tight end that high in this draft.
I know Jared Cook, who could catch and block, is suddenly quite a good player, because those are those are two of the biggest problems with Jared Cook.
It's more Jared Cook can't make any sort of contested catch, or hadn't been able to over the course of his career. I still don't think O.J. Howard is. I just think he'll have a little more consistent hands when he's wide open, whereas Cook has struggled with those.
Yeah, but I think that's his biggest issue. I think that's a far bigger problem than the contested catch thing, is that you just can't rely on him to catch the ball when he's open and they hit in a window.
That too. But still, top 15, no thank you.
Ballsy. I don't know, I don't mind him there. I think the blocking thing is huge to me. I think if you can, obviously Rob Gronkowski is this dominant player as a receiving guy, but what makes him special is that he is one of the best blocking tight ends in the league as well. So he's a matchup problem in that way, that you can't just treat him like you treat Jimmy Graham as a pure receiver, because he'll just destroy the guy opposite him in blocking. In no way, by the way, am I saying that O.J. Howard is Rob Gronkowski.
You kind of were.
No, see, this is what I'm saying. We've done this, comparing players without saying they're the same.
I'm kidding. I know. Those are the overrated players in this draft, though. I think we hit all of them. I mean, I think those are all locks to be overrated. I don't see any way we could possibly be wrong, is what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely.
On to some segments. What grinds Sam's gears? What's upsetting Sam here this morning? Sam, what do you got?
I think everyone is guilty of this, and we've avoided it so far today, pretty successfully, I think. But anybody that talks in terms of absolutes at draft time is crazy at best, and an asshole at worst. Like, we don't know.
Absolutes.
I know, yeah. This is aimed at you primarily. We just don't know. There have been guys that everyone has been 100% sold on being the safest pick in the draft, and they've busted. Or there have been guys that nobody saw coming, and they've been fantastic. And it's not even a case of just whether the guy's going to work out. It's traits. People have thought this is the one thing this guy does fantastically, and it gets to the next level, it doesn't happen. And vice versa. And everyone goes through their scouting, and they go through the tape and they go, right, this guy cannot do this, cannot play at the next level. 100%, we don't know anything 100%. We give you the best that we can do. We look through and we say, this is what we think, this is what I'm convinced is going to happen. But ultimately, any of us could be proven wrong. So I think it's easy to slip into, but it's something that drives me nuts when people start defending their take on players and just get entrenched into this absolute way of talking, and we don't know is the bottom line.
No, this is a good point to be made, and I agree with it. And I always struggle when writing our scouting reports because I'll see a guy, do something well 3 times. Good block recognition versus the run game. I'll see him do it a handful of times, but no one's perfect. No one recognizes blocks in the run game every single play. No one always does it. So I always put these sort of qualifiers like, we'll flash good block recognition in the run game when it's like, because you don't know, you could be seeing some plays, if you watch 4 games on a guy, you could just be seeing the games where he recognized blocks well, and you might miss the game where he was just absolute shit at recognizing blocks. So I always sort of hedge my bets with that stuff. But I think at the end of the day, you need to have a solid opinion, though, on a guy.
Oh, I agree.
But you have to admit that it's infallible. You can't.
Yeah.
I don't like the back and forth, wishy-washy, saying immediately qualifying, playing both sides of the fence on a guy, qualifying all your statements with, but he could, he's great, but he could do better at this. And then when he fails in the NFL, you say, I said he could have done better at this, so I knew. But
no, look, you put out your take.
Sort of qualifying. Yeah.
We've done that with all these guys. Our guys say, you put out your take. I think, Christian McCaffrey is this complete, devastating offensive weapon. But at the end of the day, I can't tell you 100% right now that he is going to be dominant in the NFL, because who knows? And that's the thing that drives me nuts. If somebody comes up and doesn't like McCaffrey and they say, no, because this, and this, it's the guys that then go, it's going to happen, 100%. Or the other way around is even worse, where you're convinced the guy is going to bust. Deshaun Kaiser say, I don't like his chances, but I can't tell you that he is 100% a bust. He cannot succeed in the NFL level, and anyone that does is just nuts.
No, I get on board. I think that's a good point that needs to be said, and it gets annoying when people, act infallible, like their opinion don't stink. So, yeah, I can get on board. All right, on to the next segment. Explain this. I think we've missed this for a couple weeks here, but we're going to explain defensive line techniques, because you hear about it all the time in the draft sort of process leading up. Oh, this guy's 3-tech, this guy's 5-tech, this guy's this guy's that along the defensive line. So we'll take a shot at explaining this. It's a little complicated. Sam, you want to give the broad strokes of how the techniques work, though, from how they're numbered, basically?
Yeah, well, the basic gist is, there are very many different positions that you can line up with along the front, but there's also exact spots along the offensive line that you can line up as well. So way back when, everybody would just line up head up over a blocker, and you try and beat your guy in an Oklahoma drill just to test the strength, one-on-one. And then people figured out that, that just isn't the most efficient way of doing this. We can try and attack gaps and try and get inside and get between linemen and create penetration in the backfield. So then you get this game of, well, okay, now we can't just play heads up over everyone. We need to try and assign gaps and figure out exactly where everyone's going to stand in this. And basically coaches developed a numbering system so that you could label exactly which technique and exactly where you stand in position in relation to blockers and to offensive linemen along that front. And that's the way that this numbering system is developed. It starts in the middle, head up over center, and that is 0. So that's your 0 tech, is your typical 3-4 nose tackle who's lining up directly over the center, and then you work out. So one technique is the outside shade of the center, and then it goes. The problem is there's a couple of different systems, and no one can agree on anything, and that's where things go off the rails.
Yeah, so after that, it's basically the gist of it is the even numbers align with head up techniques. So 2 would be on a guard, 4 is head up on a tackle, 6 head up on a tight end, and then 3 is outside the guard, 5 outside the tackle, 7 outside the tight end, and then 9 would be outside a second tight end, but it's more just a very wide alignment because you rarely are lining up outside of 2 tight ends anymore.
Yeah.
But the popular ones you'll hear about, 3 techniques, is the under tackle in the under front. It's basically your penetrator in a 4-3. The big thing about a 3 technique is you really can only have one of them on a field at a time. It's your main pass rusher on the interior. The 0-1 technique is the nose tackle, and the 3 technique is that guy. So if a team already has a 3 technique, if you have someone like Aaron Donald already, you don't need another 3 technique. So if you see guys labeled as 3 techniques in the draft, basically you can cross them off your board because having multiple of those guys doesn't do you much good. You can only fit one on the field at the time. Now, if you go out a little farther to the 4 tech, the 5 tech, those are your base defensive ends. You can put 2 of those guys in the field at once if you're someone like Jacksonville, who now has Malik Jackson and Calais Campbell, or San Francisco, who has Eric Armstead and DeForest Buckner. Those are your classic in a 3-4. You'll have 2 guys lined up over the tackles. But if you have 2 of them, again, you can't fit a third on the field at a time. So those 2 teams can't really get a Solomon Thomas. You can't really get a Jonathan Allen because then you'll have redundancy at the position again. So, and then a 9 tech is your basic, a lot of teams you'll hear the wide 9. That was popularized by, Juan Castillo and the Eagles back when they had Jason Babin and Trent Cole. No one really runs the pure wide 9 stuff anymore with 2 wide 9s on the field, but it's your speed rusher is going to come from a wide 9 technique, a guy who can turn speed to power, that sort of stuff. So that's the basic. Those are the popular ones. I think we just about hit it there. I don't know. Is there anything else that's worth adding in the defensive line techniques?
No, I think that about covers it. The bottom line is it's all about trying to deploy these guys so that you have every single gap covered and you can still rush the passer.
Yes, that is it. All right, on to the last segment here, historical power rankings. We did the most overrated players in the PFF era a little while back. We're going to do the most underrated players in the PFF era, and I'm going to kick it off. At number 5, I had Steve Smith. I think got criminally underrated he played a good deal before the PFF era, but even in the PFF era that started in 2006, he just basically, the reason why is he came from a passing offense that did not pass much. He was in one of the most run-heavy offenses in Carolina, still put up, numbers that were among the top 5, top 10 in terms of total yards, but his efficiency was much better than anyone else's. He still holds the PFF record for yards per route run. In 2008, he averaged 3.83 yards per route run, only had like 1,400 yards, but it's just because they only passed the ball. They passed the ball like 400 times that season, Carolina did. So he was the only the only threat in their passing offense. So I think he gets underrated just because he wasn't in a volume passing offense.
Yeah, that is an absolutely ridiculous number.
3.83. So Julio Jones was at like 3.2 this last year, and that was the second best we've ever seen.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous. Julio Jones is the only player in the NFL this year to be above 3, and that was 3.12.
Yeah. So Steve Smith was ridiculous in his prime, gets underrated because of that offense. Number 4, I had Eric Weddle. He is just consistently a top 5 safety in the NFL year after year, and I think the biggest thing with him is what I just said, consistency. He doesn't blow a ton of assignments. He doesn't get beaten deep a lot. He is basically you can rely on him, game in and game out. And not a flashy player, not going to have super high interception totals, not going to be Ed Reed or Earl Thomas in the single high roll, but anything else you ask of him, he is one of the best safeties in the NFL to do it. So I think he just gets underrated because of that.
Yep, I like that one.
Number 3, this is Sam's boy, definitely on Sam's list. I would bet he might be number 1 on Sam's list, and it's Chris Harris Jr., the cornerback from Denver Broncos. Nothing really more that needs to be said, just consistently a top 5 graded cornerback for us. Doesn't get treated like it because he's 5'9", was an undrafted free agent, but dude can ball year in, year out. Number 2, well, I'll let you hit. Where did you have him on your list?
I actually didn't have him on my list. I think that the hype has started to catch up with him. I think we've convinced people that Chris Harris is actually a really good corner.
Oh, Sam, I'm disappointed is all I'll say. Number 2 on the list, I had Tom Bahali. He was DeMarcus Ware without the sacks, without as many sacks. Yearly production on par with someone like DeMarcus Ware, but just didn't have the raw sack totals. Just crazy pressure numbers year after year for Kansas City. Gets underrated also because of Kansas City's market. That wasn't a huge market team. I think he's on a Hall of Fame type of course for his career, but there's almost zero chance he gets in with, fewer than 100 sacks so far for his career.
Certainly not with you selling him. DeMarcus Ware without the sacks is possibly the worst way of describing a really talented pass rusher.
Production. I'm saying the talent was DeMarcus Ware. The sacks weren't DeMarcus Ware. All right. You're correct. I was not selling that well. On to the last guy, and it was Evan Mathis. I'm contractually obligated working at PFF to say that. So
yeah, I got Evan Mathis.
He just was, the number 1 guard in the league for about 5 years without recognition that he was the number 1 guard in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, he's the poster boy for underrated players, especially on the offensive line. If you don't look like a Jason Peters, this dominant monster who just crushes people, and you weren't a top draft pick, you weren't a first round guy, you'll get ignored. And it's a really hard thing to earn that kind of recognition, especially at guard, where nobody really cares about guards. They get underrated. They're just going to throw out the first round guy that's playing well, or they think is playing well. So yeah, I mean, Evan Mathis, from going from being underrated on his own team, being in a rotation at guard where he was clearly the superior player, to being a throwaway signing in free agency by the Eagles, who ultimately turned out to be the best guy they picked in that, the Dream Team they assembled that year?
Yep.
I mean, he's been underrated his entire career. So he's the one guy that we both agree on, or we cross over on. I have Antoine Winfield, who I think was a really good cover corner, but had this ridiculous ability against the run, this possibly unique ability from a cornerback to set the tone, the physical tone on defense with these insane plays he would make against the run. You basically couldn't run to his side of the field on any kind of stretch play. You couldn't run quick bubble screens to his side of the field because he would just torpedo those instantly. I think he was an incredibly underrated player for his entire career, pretty much.
I can get on board with that. Yep.
I have split this one between 2 guys because I think they're kind of the same. Fred Jackson and Pierre Thomas, both running backs, who I think neither one was ever really seen as this complete every down guy, but they were both incredibly productive every time they got a chance to do anything, whether it's carry the ball, whether it was as a receiver or even as a blocker. I think both those guys were capable of picking up the blitz. They always graded extremely well for us, never really got the love from everyone else.
I think those guys are both poster boys for what you should be looking for in a late round running back. If you're drafting a guy in the late rounds, you don't want, and I don't want to say you don't want like high end speed and that sort of thing, but you want vision, you want reliability, you want that sort of stuff at the running back position that they had, that doesn't necessarily excite you when you're talking about testing numbers. But I think that's far more important. You see a lot more guys from the late rounds with those sort of traits make it than guys with who are super explosive running backs who fall to the late rounds make it. So that's all I'll say.
Yep, I like that one. My next one is John Abraham, who I think was a criminally underrated pass rusher for his entire career pretty much. He just consistently every single season was one of the most destructive pass rushers in the league. Never defended the run particularly well, but he would get after it, and he wouldn't just get pressure, but it would be quick impact, decisive pressure that really caused problems.
Yes, he was the definition of what you want from a designated pass rusher. He was just so good at it and so good in that role. And I think that's why he, to some degree, got underrated, because he just didn't have the raw snap totals that guys did. So he wasn't going to luck into a good deal of sacks like some other guys would who were playing full time. But in terms of consistent pressure, he was right up there with anyone else in the league.
He got 472 pressures in 8 seasons, despite never playing more than 900 snaps, including playoffs, which is ridiculous. And the last guy on my list is David Stewart, who was right tackle for the Tennessee Titans for a good number of years. I don't think we've seen a better right tackle, or even a guy hit that level, hit the heights that David Stewart hit at his time at right tackle in the entire decade that PFF has been grading. I mean, his 2008 season was absolutely ridiculous for a right tackle. He allowed 14 total pressures across 1,100 snaps and was just consistently the best right tackle in the NFL.
Yeah, I never truly got to see Dave Stewart in terms of analysis because I came on in 2012, and by then he was somewhat wrapped up in his career. He ended up retiring after the 2013 season, but yeah, just from looking at his grades, he was, like you said, by far the best right tackle in this era.
So that's my 5.
Good 5, Sam. I think we knocked every guy that deserves a mention. I think we hit them all. So good stuff. That's it for us. As always, make sure to check back next week. We'll do some more draft talk next Monday. Hope you guys have a good one.